My name is Lyra Smith. After many years, I opened my dream restaurant hoping my family would finally be proud. Not one of them came. Every chair stayed empty while they laughed at my sister's backyard party drinking cheap beer under string lights. I stood alone in a candlelit dining room, lemon tart, untouched. Hours later, Dad texted, "We should discuss what you owe the family for that restaurant." My reply was ice cold and it made them regret everything. Before I dive into what really happened that night, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments, and if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, tap that like button and hit subscribe so I know I'm not alone. The night my restaurant opened, I told myself not to stare at the door every time it swung open. But I did. Each creak of the hinges felt like hope, and each time it wasn't them, it felt like betrayal. The dining room was perfect tables polished until they gleamed handwritten menu cards at each setting, candles burning down slow. I'd chosen songs that reminded me of my childhood, the ones Mom used to hum while she cooked Sunday breakfast. The playlist looped on empty speakers. I wanted them to see me, to see what I'd built. For years, I'd carried groceries into their kitchens cooked for birthdays, Thanksgiving, even Ezra's college graduation. "You've got the touch," Dad would say, but always with a smile that meant it's just a hobby, not a career. When I announced I was opening my own place, Mom pursed her lips like I'd said I was running away to join the circus. Ezra smirked and asked if I was going to call it Lyra's Little Experiment. But I thought deep down they'd come around. Families argue, families doubt, families still show up. That night, they didn't. Instead, I watched Ezra's Instagram story play across my phone, a shaky video of him cutting a sheet cake in the backyard while everyone clapped. "Promotion party vibes," the caption read. Plastic chairs, paper plates, beer bottles sweating in the grass. And behind him, my whole family, laughing, dancing. Not one of them sent me a text to say they couldn't make it. Not Mom, not Dad, not Ezra. I told myself maybe they'd surprise me later. Maybe they'd show up for dessert. But by 10 o'clock, I was folding napkins no one had touched, scraping plates that had never been used. My lemon tart, the one Ezra had begged me to make for his high school graduation, sat untouched on the counter. When Dad finally texted, the words were casual, almost businesslike. "We need to talk about your restaurant. No apology, no acknowledgement." Just a reminder that to him, my life's dream was a line item in his ledger. I didn't answer right away. I stared at that message until the letters blurred. Years of being the backup plan, the second choice, the artsy one with impractical dreams, all of it boiled to the surface. And I realized something: they didn't forget me. They ignored me. Growing up, that was the theme of my life. Ezra was the golden boy, the achiever, the star. His trophies lined the mantel. His college acceptance letter got framed. Dad wore his promotion like a badge, and me, I was background noise. The one Mom introduced as our creative daughter, the free spirit, which was just a polite way of saying the disappointment. But what they didn't know was that being ignored teaches you how to listen, to watch, to wait. That night, as I wiped down the counters and turned off the lights, I decided I wasn't going to beg for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to keep leaving the door unlocked hoping they'd finally walk through. If family could treat me like a footnote, then maybe family didn't deserve a seat at my table. The decision came in a single sentence. Short, cold, final. I typed it out with steady fingers and hit send. Effective immediately, the restaurant is closed to all family. No reservations, no discounts, no exceptions. Within minutes, my phone lit up like a fire alarm. 19 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, and then a knock at the back kitchen door. Of course it was Ezra. Ezra stood at the back door, one hand in his pocket, the other clutching a cardboard cake box. I didn't open it right away. I just watched him through the glass, the fluorescent kitchen light spilling across his pressed blazer and carefully combed hair. He looked like a man who had been celebrating too hard but didn't feel guilty enough to admit it. When I finally opened the door, the smell of too much cologne hit me before his words did. "Figured you'd want a slice," he said, lifting the box like it was some kind of peace offering. Inside, I caught a glimpse of the frosted words, "To bigger things." I didn't move. My arms crossed tight across my chest. Bigger things, huh? I said. Guess my restaurant didn't count. His smile faltered. Come on, Jules. We didn't think it was that big of a deal. Dad said it was more of a soft launch vibe. Soft launch. My voice was soft, but the edge in it could have cut glass. I texted Mom 3 times. I made your favorite lemon tart Ezra. It sat untouched for 5 hours. Tell me, does that sound like a soft launch to you? He shifted his wide eyes, sliding away. People got busy. No. I stepped closer until the cake box wavered in his hand. People got lazy. People made choices. And every single one of you chose not to show up. For a second, the mask cracked. His jaw tightened and the smile disappeared. Dad wants to invest, he said, changing the subject. He sees potential now. He asked me to talk to you. There it was. The real reason he'd come. Not guilt, not love, just business. Tell Dad the restaurant's fully funded, I replied, and the investor bought exclusive rights to my loyalty. Ezra blinked. What does that mean? It means you're late? I said, reaching for the trash bag by the door, and I don't do leftovers. I tossed the bag into the dumpster, the sound sharp in the quiet alley. His shoulders sagged, but his mouth kept working. Jules, come on. Don't make this into some big drama. We're family. I looked him dead in the eye. Exactly. Which is why it hurts more. I shut the door. His footsteps faded slow and heavy until there was only silence. The next morning I changed the locks, not just at the restaurant, but at my apartment too. For years, my family had treated my space like a revolving door. Lyra, we need a place to crash. Can we store some boxes here? Can I borrow your car just until Monday every time I'd said yes because saying no made me feel selfish? Because deep down, I thought being useful was the only way to be loved. But love doesn't flake on your life's biggest night. Love doesn't shrug off your invitations. So I posted a sign on the restaurant door. Due to overwhelming support, we're transitioning to reservations only. No walk-ins accepted even if we share DNA. By noon, a food blogger had snapped a photo. By evening, it went viral. The comments poured in, "This woman is my hero. Boundaries taste better than betrayal. Tell Ezra to eat a slice of humble pie." My phone buzzed nonstop. Mom called 5 times, left a single voicemail. "Lyra, this is childish. We made a mistake, but you're making things worse." I didn't respond. Instead, I greeted the first couple who showed up after the story spread. Tourists from Georgia. The woman smiled as she took her seat. "We canceled our other reservation just to eat here," she said. As I led them to their table, I caught my reflection in the front window. I didn't look bitter. I didn't look angry. I looked free. 2 days later, Dad appeared at my apartment. He didn't risk the restaurant too many eyes, too many cameras. I watched him through the peephole. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie loosened. He looked less like a patriarch and more like a man losing control of a story he thought he wrote. "Let's be adults about this," he said when I finally opened the door but didn't step aside. "You want to talk?" I asked. "We talk here." His sigh was heavy. "Your mother's upset. Ezra's confused. We all are." I folded my arms. "Confused about what?" "That I finally stopped begging for a seat at your table." "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We're not enemies." "No," I said evenly. "You're just people who forget I exist unless I'm footing the bill or cooking the meal." He flinched, then lowered his voice. "I was going to help you. I was looking into some financing." "You mean equity?" I shot back. "Control." His face hardened. "Don't be paranoid." I stepped inside, grabbed the manila envelope sitting on the console, and handed it to him. "Here's the deed. The restaurant is solely in my name. The LLC, the recipes, the patents, all mine." His eyes flicked over the papers. "You got a lawyer." "I got a team," I said. "Funny what happens when you stop waiting for permission to shine." He muttered something about burning bridges. I answered calmly, "Then I guess I'll learn to swim." When the door clicked shut behind him, I felt lighter than I had in years. But the battle wasn't over. That night, Ezra's fiancée, Natalie, showed up at the restaurant, trembling, phone in hand. She slid into a booth, eyes darting around like she was being followed. I didn't know she whispered. I didn't know how far they'd go. I stayed quiet, waiting. They created a WhatsApp group, she said. Your mom, Ezra, Aunt Linda, even Cousin Mark. They called it Project Reset. The plan was to pressure you into selling the restaurant or force you to fail. Her hands shook as she pushed the phone across the table. Screenshots, dates, voice notes, proof. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Her voice cracked. Because they dragged me into it, and because I don't want to marry someone who treats his sister like that. I stared at the evidence glowing on the screen. My family wasn't just dismissing me anymore. They were actively trying to destroy me. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family spat. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. Natalie's phone burned in my mind, every screenshot seared into memory. Project Reset. The name alone made my stomach twist. It wasn't just careless words or petty jealousy. It was strategy, calculated sabotage, and the players were people who shared my blood. The next morning, I found Grandma at the kitchen table clipping coupons with hands that shook more than they used to. The sun poured through the blinds, striping the table in gold and shadow. She didn't ask where I'd been or why my face looked like I hadn't slept. She just pushed a plate of toast toward me, butter melting into the corners. Eat, she said softly. I sat staring at her fragile hands. She'd always been the one who saw me not the chef, not the disappointment, just Lyra. The woman who slipped me a 20 when Dad barked about responsibility. The one who clapped loudest at my high school talent show. And now the same family she raised was plotting to erase me. Grandma, I asked carefully, did Dad ever pressure you about money? Her eyes flickered, then settled on her coffee cup. He's always had ideas, she murmured. Investments, plans. But I never thought her voice cracked. She stopped. That was my answer. By the time I walked into my restaurant that afternoon, I'd already called 3 numbers, 1 lawyer, 1 accountant, 1 friend who knew how to dig into things the internet could hide. The smear campaign had already started. Yelp reviews tanking me with identical phrases. Food was cold. Staff was rude. We didn't belong. None of them matched my reservation log. It was war by keyboard, invisible but lethal. I refused to crumble. That night, I sat across from my lawyer, a sharp woman named Davis, who wore her hair pulled back so tight it looked like it could cut. She flipped through Natalie's screenshots, her lips pressed thin. This isn't family drama, she said flatly. This is organized interference, harassment, maybe even fraud. What can we do? I asked, my voice lower than I meant it to be. We start with a cease and desist, Davis replied. And then we build a case. Elder financial abuse, attempted coercion, defamation. But we'll need more than screenshots. We'll need a witness. My chest tightened. Natalie's trembling hands, her whisper, I don't want to marry someone who treats his sister like that. She'll testify, I said steady. She knows the truth. Davis nodded once. Good. Then here's the plan. We let them think they're winning. We watch. We gather everything. And when they come back from whatever trip they're on, we'll be waiting with paperwork they can't ignore. I leaned back, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. The plan wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was survival, protection, boundaries carved in stone instead of sand. But boundaries come at a cost. That week, Grandma wilted under the silence. She watered her garden in the morning, cut roses in the afternoon, but she moved like her body carried weights. Every time the phone rang with Mom's name, I watched her flinch. She didn't pick up. She didn't defend herself. She just stayed quiet. One evening, I found her staring at an old photo, our family at Ezra's high school graduation. Everyone smiling, arms around each other, except me standing at the end, half cropped out of the frame. Maybe I should call them, she whispered. No, I said quickly. Too quickly. Grandma, they don't want to fix this. They want to erase it. They want to erase me. Her eyes watered, but she nodded, tucking the photo back into its frame. She didn't argue. I walked away, guilt tearing at me. But then I remembered Dad's words at my apartment, I was going to help you. His version of help had always meant strings, attached chains disguised as lifelines. I wasn't falling for it again. The next move came faster than I expected. A supplier called Voice Apologetic. "Lyra, we got a call from your dad. Said you weren't paying your invoices. He told us to pull your account." My blood ran cold. "That's a lie," I snapped. "Check your records." "I did," the supplier admitted. "Your payments are early." But he sounded convincing. Convincing. That was Dad's gift. He could look a stranger in the eye, spin a story, and make it gospel. That night, I sat with Davis again. She tapped her pen against the table. "He's escalating. That's good. It makes him sloppy. Keep documenting everything." I left the meeting with a folder heavier than my chest, but inside me, something else stirred. Not just anger, not just hurt. Resolve. I started talking to my staff differently, firmer, clearer. "We protect this space," I told them. "We don't let the noise outside define us. We cook. We serve. We stand tall." They nodded, some of them even smiling. One of the servers, a single mom named Carla, squeezed my arm. "You're stronger than them," she said. That night after close, I wrote in my notebook, "The day they come home, we'll be ready." Because they were coming back. They always came back expecting doors to be open, plates to be waiting, forgiveness served like dessert. Not this time. 2 weeks later, word came Mom, Dad, Ezra, they'd gone on some kind of family trip, flaunting photos on social media. Beaches, cocktails, captions about new beginnings. Meanwhile, my Yelp page bled 1-star reviews like someone had hacked the system. But I didn't panic. I prepared. I gathered every fake review, cross-checked reservation logs, highlighted contradictions. I printed Natalie's screenshots, had them notarized. Davis drafted the paperwork. The night before their flight landed, I stood in my restaurant's dining room, lights dimmed, air thick with garlic and rosemary. My staff cleaned around me, laughter soft but steady. I looked around and thought, this is mine. They can't touch it unless I let them. When I went home, Grandma was asleep in her chair, a half-finished crossword in her lap. I tucked a blanket over her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow," I whispered, though she didn't hear me. "Tomorrow, it's our turn." I lay in bed with my phone face down on the nightstand. My hands didn't shake anymore. My breath came slow, steady, because the fear had burned away, leaving only clarity. This wasn't about asking them to see me anymore. This was about making sure they couldn't erase me, couldn't erase us. The day they returned, we would be waiting with the law, with the truth, with everything they'd never expected me to have. The airport always smelled the same burnt coffee floor polish and too many perfumes mingling in one recycled air space. I stood near the arrivals gate with Davis at my side, manila folder tucked under her arm like a weapon. My palms were dry. No sweat, no trembling, just stillness. The flight from Cancun landed 15 minutes late. People streamed out, families juggling suitcases, kids dragging stuffed animals, couples with sunburns and braided hair. Then I saw them. Dad first, shoulders squared, rolling a sleek black suitcase. Mom trailed behind sunglasses perched on her head, lips tight. And Ezra, tanned, grinning, scrolling on his phone like the world owed him more attention. They spotted me almost instantly. Dad slowed. Ezra smirked. Mom whispered something under her breath. Davis stepped forward. "Mr. Smith, you've been served." She held out the thick envelope. Dad froze. For the first time in my life, I saw him hesitate. Not calculating, not charming, hesitate. People moved around us, curious glances darting our way. Ezra laughed. "Seriously, in public? You've lost it, Lyra." I locked eyes with him. "No, Ezra. I found it." Dad snatched the envelope, flipping through the pages with a clenched jaw. "This is ridiculous. You think you can drag your own family through the mud over what hurt feelings." I stepped closer, my voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. Over fraud, over harassment, over trying to destroy everything I built because you couldn't stand that it wasn't yours to control. Mom finally spoke, her voice sharp as glass. "Stop making a scene. We can settle this at home." I shook my head. "No, Mom. Home is where you ignore me. Home is where Ezra gets a promotion cake while my restaurant sits empty. This, I gestured at Davis, the papers, the people watching. This is where accountability happens. Ezra's grin faltered. Come on, Jules, don't act like you're some victim. You shut us out. You banned your own family from your restaurant. I met his gaze without blinking. Because family doesn't get to eat at my table if they can't even show up for me once. The words hung heavy, louder than the chatter of travelers, louder than the announcement blaring overhead. Dad jabbed a finger toward me. This will come back to bite you. You're burning bridges you'll regret. I stepped forward until his finger hovered inches from my chest. Then I'll learn to swim. His face reddened. He opened his mouth, but Davis cut in calm and sharp. Mr. Smith, you've been formally notified. Any attempt to interfere with Mrs. Smith's business from this point forward will result in immediate legal escalation. He sputtered, flipping through the documents again. You can't. But he stopped. Because he saw the notarized screenshots, Natalie's testimony, the cross-referenced reviews, all of it laid out undeniable. Mom clutched his arm. Let's go, she hissed, her eyes darting around at the small crowd gathering. Phones were out. People were recording. Ezra muttered, unbelievable. But I caught the flicker in his eyes, fear. For once the golden boy wasn't untouchable. Lyra, Dad said, finally, his voice, low teeth clenched. You're making enemies you don't need. No, I said, calm and steady. I'm protecting myself from enemies I never asked for. The only difference now is that the world gets to see who you really are. Silence stretched between us. Then Dad turned, dragging Mom by the armed suitcase wheels, rattling angrily behind him. Ezra followed slower, shoulders tense. He glanced back once, lips pressed tight, but he didn't say a word. They disappeared into the crowd. I exhaled a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Davis touched my arm. You did it. No, I said softly, watching the doors slide shut behind them. We did it. But the confrontation didn't end at the airport. The smear campaign collapsed almost overnight. The article Davis arranged with the journalist went live the next morning. Chef exposes family's plot to sabotage her career. Screenshots, timelines, testimony. Natalie's name was right there, her words damning. The internet lit up. Hashtag spread. Stand with Lyra. Old friends reached out, strangers left 5-star reviews. Customers lined up at my door. The restaurant buzzed like never before, clinking glasses, laughter spilling into the street plates cleared to the last crumb. My staff worked with a new energy, proud, defiant. They knew the truth, and now so did everyone else. But the biggest moment came 3 nights later. We were closing up when the door opened. Natalie stepped inside, pale but resolute. She slid into a booth, her hands clasped tight. They're furious with me, she said, but I couldn't marry into that, not after what I saw. I sat across from her. You did the right thing. She shook her head. I just told the truth. You're the one who stood up to them. Her words lingered as I walked her out. For the first time, I didn't feel like the black sheep, the outsider. I felt like someone who had rewritten the story. The real turning point came in court weeks later. Dad tried to argue, tried to spin his charm, but the evidence was clear. The judge's words echoed financial interference and attempted coercion of family assets will not be tolerated. Grandma's money was protected. My restaurant's ownership was affirmed. And the will, oh, the will was rewritten. Dad and Ezra removed entirely. When the gavel struck, Dad's face went pale. Ezra sat stone-faced, fists clenched. Mom cried quietly, but not for me. Never for me. I walked out of that courthouse with Grandma on my arm, her hand light but steady. She whispered, "You saved us." I smiled. No Grandma. I finally saved myself. The echo of that airport confrontation stayed with me. The sight of Dad, frozen Ezra speechless, Mom scrambling. For once the power wasn't theirs. It was mine. And I wasn't giving it back. The courthouse steps were warm under the afternoon sun, but I felt lighter than air. Grandma's arm looped through mine, her small frame, steadier than I'd seen in months. She smiled up at me with eyes that glistened, not with weakness, but with pride. "Lyra," she said softly, You did what I never could. I squeezed her hand. We did it together. The judgment didn't erase the scars, but it built something stronger in their place. Dad and Ezra were officially cut from the will their names struck through like misspelled words. Grandma's finances were locked tight under protection, and my restaurant mine alone was untouchable. That night, we returned home to her little garden. She clipped roses as if the world had just handed her back time. Each snip of the shears was sharp certain, and when she placed a bloom in my hands, I realized it wasn't just a flower, it was trust. I thought about the countless nights she'd sat at that table folding coupons, staying quiet while the rest of the family made noise. Now her silence wasn't fear, it was peace. My restaurant, too, became more than a business. It was a sanctuary. The viral headlines had drawn customers, sure, but what kept them coming wasn't scandal, it was honesty. People walked in because they'd read my story and saw themselves in it, the overlooked sibling, the forgotten child, the one who worked twice as hard for half the recognition. They came for the food, but they stayed for the connection. One evening, a woman came in alone clutching a small leather notebook. She ordered the lemon tart and sat at the counter. When I brought her plate, she leaned in. "I saw what you did," she whispered. "My daughter wants to be a chef, but she's scared she'll never be good enough. I showed her your story. She said, if Lyra can stand up to her family, maybe I can too." Her words nearly broke me, because that's what this had become. Not revenge, not even justice, but a beacon. Proof that you could fight back against the people who tried to keep you small and still build something beautiful. Grandma visited often, sitting at her favorite corner table sipping tea while she watched me work. She wasn't frail anymore. She laughed more. She even teased me about the line of customers waiting out the door. "Looks like you finally made it," she'd say, and I'd laugh. But deep down, I knew she was right. But the victory didn't erase everything. Some nights when the restaurant was dark and I walked home under the streetlights, I thought about Dad's warning at the airport. This will come back to bite you. Maybe it would. Maybe the bridges I burned would stay in ashes. But I'd learned something more important. I didn't need those bridges. I'd built my own road. Months passed. My phone filled with reservation requests. Food critics called me a rising star. And one afternoon, my landlord sat across from me, grinning over his coffee. 5 more years, he said. Lease locked. Rent stable. You're the pride of this block. I thought about all the times my family had called my dream fragile, unrealistic. Now strangers were rooting for me louder than they ever had. And it wasn't because I begged for their approval, it was because I stopped. At night, when the last dish was washed and the last chair stacked, I often stood barefoot in the dining room, wine glass in hand, breathing in the silence. Not a lonely silence anymore, but a clean one. A silence I chose. 1 year later, the mail brought a gold-foiled envelope, Ezra's engagement brunch. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. The same family who had once locked me out of celebrations now wanted me to smile in their photos. I set the envelope on the counter, stared at it for a long moment, then dropped it in the blender and pressed pulse. Shredded gold confetti swirled into dust. That same evening, I finalized the lease on my second restaurant. Downtown, historic brick building, exposed beams, rooftop garden, twice the kitchen space, twice the fire. I hired a staff of overlooked dreamers, culinary grads with no connections, single moms rebuilding quiet talents who had been told no too many times. Together we built something sacred, not just food, dignity. On opening day, a reporter asked me, "What would you say to your family now?" I smiled slow and soft. Nothing. Because they didn't need answers. They needed accountability, and I had nothing left to prove. Later that night, I stood in the new kitchen flour, dusting my apron dough sticking to my fingers. Laughter filled the air behind me. Hope hummed low, steady. And then the door opened. A young woman stepped in, nervous, twisting her hands together. "I saw your story," she said. "My daughter wants to be a chef. She's afraid she won't be good enough." I wiped my hands and handed her a menu. "Tell her this," I said. They said the same to me. Her eyes shone, and I realized the story wasn't ending here. It was only beginning. When I look back now, it isn't the missed chairs at my restaurant that sting the most. It's the years of silence I mistook for love, the scraps of attention I thought were meals. But here's what I've learned. Real love shows up. Real love doesn't keep score or demand control. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is draw the line, even if it means standing alone for a while. I'm not the black sheep anymore. I'm not the backup plan or the daughter introduced with a shrug. I'm Lyra Smith, chef, builder, survivor. And I know this much success, seasoned with boundaries, tastes better than any apology I never got. Maybe you've lived through something similar. Maybe your family tried to shrink you too. If you've ever had to fight for your own worth, you're not alone here. Share your story in the comments I'll be reading. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because the next story might just be yours.